I've been asked to speak this morning about my role in the SmartS project and also, of course, about the best practice guide. So you'll be hearing from me some representation of the two organisations. You can see logos on there, Aquabex and the Flood Protection Association, and a few personal thoughts thrown in there as well. So the Flood Protection Association and Aquabex. A little bit of personal background. I've been in the flood protection industry for over 10 years, and it's been very tiring. But it's been very, very interesting to see something start from fairly small beginnings when we wouldn't have very much interest in what the industry produced to where we are now, where insurers and institutions are paying quite a lot of attention to it. In 2003, when I was working with flood guards, I sold and project managed what were two of the largest schemes for property level at that time. The scheme in Elgin, which started in 2003, was over 400 homes. And thereon we did Carlisle shortly after that flooded. And because I was very close to these particular projects and I didn't see a lot of similar projects at the time, then I pushed these quite hard to DEFRA, the Environment Agency, to see really where these type of schemes could go. And it was obviously very encouraging for me in the industry to see that there was a certain amount of government support that was thereon able to be gained. A bit later I delivered what I understand to be the largest single site protection for temporary or demountable products, which was a government site, and the total value of that scheme was £1.6 million. That involved multiple products going into a large infrastructure type of site. So that's kind of where I've been. Where I am now is as a director of Aquabex, and you'll hear more about Aquabex later in the presentation, and also a director of the Flood Protection Association, and you'll certainly hear about that. My involvement in SmartS really it's in a number of different modes, but initially I joined the UK support group. So the UK support group was there for people who had an interest, and it was mainly comprised of very passionate and very diverse views of the flood protection in this industry, particularly manufacturers. But in addition to that, there were interested parties, representations from the insurance sector, from the Ordnance Survey, and from others. The second sort of stream of activity I had was developing an R&D project through the scheme, which was a flood safety door. One of the questions a few minutes ago was about the structural issues and how you can try and protect a house and actually it could do more damage. Well, we tried to address this through a flood safety door and also address some of the evacuation issues and the big danger of someone opening an inward opening door when there's a big head of flood water against it. The third sort of role I had was I had an appointment to the applications and implementations group. Again, I'll explain a little bit more about that. And my interest in SmartS really was summoned by the fact that it was pushing advances in technology. So what I'd been promoting previously was very sort of dumb technology, clipping flood guards onto frames around front doors, which we can see that sometimes there can be resistance to actually doing that, yet alone sometimes problems with the actual products themselves. I was also very interested that SmartS was out there to try and look at the routes to market, because there was some of this technology was out there, but it was very hard to reach the organisations that needed to know about it, and certainly very hard to put it into the hands of people that needed to use it. And then industry awareness. So for me, I always like to keep abreast of what's going on in the industry, and I wouldn't miss an opportunity like that, and particularly a chance for personal development through working with the project. So starting with the first of those streams, the UK support group, there was actually a group for each of the partner countries in the scheme. So what we did in the UK was replicated in other countries, and I'm sure you've discussed all the partners that were part of the scheme. As I said, there was a large group of manufacturers and other interested parties. And the main function of this group really was to assist the research team, because research was looking at reports and doing their own market research and studies, but to actually hear from these interested parties the information that they had, but also some very strong opinions, I think was very useful to the team, once they actually could pull people apart from each other. And the main subject matters given the members of that group were, of course, the technology and the struggle that many of us had with that route to market that Jim has already touched on with his question. So it was a very, very interesting group to work in. I hope you also found it as a project team. Running parallel with the UK support group and providing quite a lot of the members of the support group was the Flood Protection Association. So the Flood Protection Association is a UK-based trade body. Again, in at least 2 countries, there are similar type of organisations. So there are comparable people even within partner countries such as Germany. This group consists of manufacturers, installers, and consultants. So quite a range of skills, but all focused on flood protection and generally at the smaller end of schemes. And the flood protection itself, whilst for some time it has been slightly maligned in some audiences, it does have new leadership, and it's very much now focusing on things such as enforcing minimum standards. So actually having a sense of discipline amongst its members and actually pushing things such as best practice and professionalism within the industry. I'm sure that many of you who have come across the industry will know that there is a big range of people that are providing products into the industry, from very technical products within large organisations, but in the main towards the lower end. And the lowest end, could be, tailoring particular flood products on site without any certification and without any 6 steps. So there's a big range, and the flood protection industry is there to try and pull a sense of professionalism there and pull these things in line. In addition to that, as it is a trade body, then it's there to provide industry representation. And that is really, really important, because for SMEs to shout, it normally doesn't get your voice heard. But when you combine together and you have a uniform message, then it can help. And the FPA is represented in a number of groups. And of course, if you watch breakfast TV when the flooding is occurring anywhere in the country, then we find that Mary is representing the FPA on primetime media very, very well. So the benefit to the members is that they can get drawn towards this professionalism and also get the publicity, the awareness that's required. And if you look at the shot there, you might see 1 or 2 companies that you recognise, and certainly quite a few that you won't recognise. But there's quite a range of members, and the website has got all of the members listed, and you can get direct links to all of their individual websites. So the Flood Protection Association, it was contributing members to the UK National Support Group, and then the project also asked for the FPA to have a representative on the Applications and Implementations Group. So this really was a group to oversee the work that the researchers were carrying out, and it involved going to project meetings in the different partner countries. So I certainly enjoyed visiting some partner countries and visiting their facilities. The functions of the group were there to review the papers. So we had each of the work packages, they presented papers to us. And we were to provide the input from a different perspective rather than a research-based perspective. So it was there on behalf of industry, the insurance sector, public bodies, and also standards bodies. And excuse me, a few examples of some of the inputs that we made. Initially, we talked about the project structure, and there was some modification made to that. There were some corrections to research. Some of the more notable ones were around insurance. We had some very good insurance representation, which I know the research group valued. There was also a constant bringing back an emphasis and focus for the project, because the research is naturally carried out by academics, and the AIG was people that wanted to apply and implement these ideas, and so they could be practical. So there was a constant drawing back to how things needed to be focused around the end user. And then the final thing I put on this slide is legacy, because as we worked through the project, it was important that it wasn't just money spent by the European Commission that was going to be, it was going to sponsor a bit of research and work for various bodies and a few beers and a few bars after the hours, but it was important that it actually had something that was going to be delivered for the long term. And so this is where the guidance really becomes important in my view, because there were other things that have potential legacy out of the SmartS project. Some of them which you may or may not be aware of include things like damage models, which have been fine-tuned to a more appropriate level. The learning that's gone on throughout these partner countries has been very, very important, and the skills I know that are embedded in some of the researchers could carry on and offer more value in the coming years. But the guidance is something that's very, very practical. I've asked the question, why is it needed? And the first thing, going back to the FPA represents the cream of the flood protection industry, and there's much more out there, but the industry is SMEs. It's people who have tried something on their own front door and try and replicate it in a shed. It's people that perhaps don't have the capital investment to make to set up a good business, or perhaps don't have the nous to do it. And these people might be very well intended in terms of helping some neighbours, but they wouldn't understand how these things need to be put into the right context, and things like the 6 steps, of course. There's also a very limited market. So when people get excited because they've found something that can work on their own front door and they want to replicate it, they do very quick back of a beer mat calculations and then tell you that the market for flood protection products is several billion pounds. In reality, a year later, they find that if they've sold more than a dozen or a few dozen units, they're doing very, very well. And that can lead, with this lack of business now, lack of investment, lack of market, it can lead to desperation. It can lead to people who actually will start to do what's more in the interest of their business to survive and to pay a bill at the end of the week, rather than delivering what is right for the flood risk communities. And the final thing, and some people will just shortcut to this anyway, is abuse and mis-selling. So people will go and sell a product, oversell how it performs, perhaps take deposits and not be able to deliver the contract. And some people will shortcut to this. Now, the FPA is about eradicating that, but the best practice is there to actually demonstrate how it should do and to build the expectation within the user community. What we want is trust from the buyer community for the industry, and this is one step towards it. So how does the guidance become a legacy? Well, for the Flood Protection Association, it can implement the principles of the best practice. Practically, it can review its own code of conduct, and we've been discussing with the SmartS team how there can be independent review of its code of conduct to ensure that minimum standards are applied within the industry. We can certainly support best practice, push people towards accreditation, push people towards the right processes in their business, but at the same time as not being too restrictive on how they should run the business. Ultimately, if we don't want to stifle innovation and new businesses coming in, so we can't tell people how they should run their business, but we can offer the best practice and give them something to head towards. For the FPA, we also need to build relationships with user groups and community groups, and of course reaching our hand across to the National Flood Forum. So that means that where we improve our standards, we build the trust, and then through the National Flood Forum and other groups, then we can reach these communities who, one of the previous answers that came from the panel was that fact that you needed to be in the community. I think it was Heather. And then ongoing reviews of best practice, because best practice will not stand still. Technology won't stand still, so best practice needs to move with it. Government policy will move, best practice will move with it. So apart from being adopted within the flood protection industry, it will need to be adopted by individual companies. And this is where I speak on behalf of Aquabex, my business. And we actually came to very similar conclusions about what was required. Now, we're an outsourcing company, so trying to find how you actually put a product in, but also you provide an independent survey was quite difficult, so it relies on a third-party model. So we work with partners through this process, which starts with a desktop flood report and ends up with providing an insurable asset you mitigate the risk to the lowest level so that it can be insured. So these steps, they don't exactly mirror what's in the best practice, but they describe it in a very similar way. And in fact, for our different groups of clients, whether it's utilities, government, communities, or business, these steps are described slightly different, but the principles and the overall effect describes the best practice. For us as a business that outsource much of this activity, our main focus is on design and specification, because if you get the right data from a very good in-depth flood report, you understand the risk, you understand the structural limitations of the property, you understand the user and what they can and can't do. You also have some idea about budget. If you understand that background information, then you can specify the right product. And if it doesn't exist, then you can go and work with your partner suppliers and actually get them working in a particular fashion. You know, if it means modification that's required, that can happen. So this step for us is very, very important, and we know it's in the best practice there as well. For Aquabex, we do our role in specification on the basis of our knowledge also of all of the solutions which are out there. These are accredited solutions and non-accredited solutions, tried and tested solutions, and also some very novel ones which are new to the market. And as you can see from the pictures on the slide, that they can all be thoroughly tested. But yeah, we can look at test report, certification, and all manner of evidence, but they need to be properly specified. So that's how we adopt it as an individual company. And that's how we adopt it as an industry. So I hope you can see from that there is a legacy. I know we're going to answer some questions for you in a short while, but I've got 3 questions for you to ponder. Where we spoke about the commercial pressures, then I know from the procurement community and also from the flood risk community, there are other pressures at work. And I'd like to ask you to question to yourselves, what is the status of the kite mark? What is the value? Is it just a tick box exercise? Does everything that have a kite mark, is everything then therefore appropriate? And I've seen this in many local authority procurement exercises that is the view, it's a tick box. So I'd suggest that there may be other ways to look at this. I'd suggest that there may be room for the kite mark to be reviewed. Secondly, innovation. What innovation? A lot of the procurement of technology is through framework contracts, it's through known companies, and it involves very little either reaching out to looking for technology, or in many cases it involves very little access for SMEs, people with new ideas that they need to run past you. So I'd say we don't want, there is some benefit in frameworks, but we don't want to stifle innovation. So please keep that door open for innovators. And then finally, commercial interests or what's best. So as you run these schemes, or as you're looking at them, are you looking at whole life costs? Are you looking at sustainability? Or are you simply trying to deliver as much as you can to fulfill a commitment or a desire that someone's stated, all within a budget? So 3 questions for you, and then I shall retire and take what you throw at me. Thank you.